My father looked me dead in the eyes at our Thanksgiving table and told me I was only invited out of pity. He warned me not to stay long and embarrass my successful brother. I did not scream or throw my glass. I just smiled, took a sip of my wine, and quietly walked out the door. 5 days later, the family discovered I had just sold the beloved vacation cabin they all counted on to maintain their wealthy image. Their bank accounts froze completely. The lawyer letters arrived at their doorstep, and the absolute panic finally began. Before I tell you how a supposed clerical temp worker dismantled an entire family dynasty, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain of a toxic family while secretly holding the match that would burn their lives to the ground. I am Zora, and I am 35 years old. The crystal chandelier above my parents' dining table cast a cold and sharp light over the imported mahogany wood. We were at their lavish Atlanta estate, a sprawling and immaculate property in Buckhead that my father Warren treated like his own personal kingdom. I stood near the edge of the formal dining room holding a glass of Cabernet. I had barely taken 2 sips of my drink when my father decided to ruin the evening before the food was even served. He adjusted his perfectly tailored suit jacket, looked me up and down with sheer disdain, and delivered his harsh verdict. "We only invited you out of pity, Zora," he said, his voice echoing in the large room. "Do not eat too much, and please do not stay long. Your brother has real investors coming over later, and you lingering around in that cheap dress is simply bad for optics." I did not cry. I did not shrink away or lower my gaze the way I would have when I was a terrified 20-year-old girl desperately seeking his approval. Instead, I took a slow and deliberate sip of my wine and looked around the room. My older brother Malik, the undisputed golden child of the family, leaned back in his expensive leather dining chair. He smirked while swirling his bourbon, clearly enjoying the public humiliation his father was dishing out. Beside him sat his white wife, Brittany. She did a terrible job of hiding a laugh behind her manicured hand. She leaned closer to Malik, muttering in a stage whisper that was clearly meant for me to hear. She said my natural hair just did not fit the country club aesthetic anyway, and she wondered why I even bothered showing up to these high-class family events. Brittany had always enjoyed making those little comments. From the moment she married Malik, she seamlessly adopted my family's favorite pastime, which was treating me like an unwelcome charity case who did not belong in their upper-crust world. She adjusted her heavy diamond tennis bracelet, a gift paid for by my father's company, and gave me a look of pure, unadulterated pity. I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring the absolute absurdity of their arrogance. The air in the room was thick with their smug superiority. They really believed they held all the power. They truly believed I was exactly who they wanted me to be, a failed and struggling disappointment who desperately needed their scraps of attention. Malik set his bourbon glass down with a heavy thud, commanding the room's attention as he always loved to do. He immediately launched into a boastful monologue about his thriving logistics empire. He talked loudly and proudly about acquiring new commercial fleets, expanding his business territory, and how these mysterious investors coming over later were going to help him take the company public by the end of the year. He puffed out his chest, soaking in my father's approving nods and Brittany's adoring gaze. My mother, Valerie, rushed into the room carrying a heavy silver tray of appetizers. She caught the tail end of Malik's speech and immediately turned her anxious, calculating eyes toward me. "Zora, please," she began, her voice dripping with that fake and condescending sweetness she used whenever she wanted to put me in my place. "Promise me you will not ask Malik for a handout tonight. I know your little clerical temp job probably is not paying your bills, but your brother is under a lot of pressure building his empire. He simply cannot carry your financial burdens right now." I looked at my mother, a woman who had stood by in absolute silence and watched my father throw me out of this very house 15 years ago. They had literally handed me a garbage bag of my clothes and kicked me to the curb at 20 years old, all because I refused to let Warren dictate my college major. He had demanded I study something supportive, something that would eventually make me a good administrative assistant for Malik's future business endeavors. When I chose finance and economics instead, demanding to forge my own path, I was branded the black sheep and cut off without a single dime. They told me I would fail miserably. They told me I would be back begging on my knees within a month. I let my mother and brother talk internally, noting the hilarious reality of their current situation. Malik's logistics company had not turned a profit in 4 years. He was bleeding money, drowning in severe corporate debt, and frantically trying to secure investors just to cover up his massive financial holes and avoid bankruptcy. But I did not say any of that out loud. I did not defend my supposed temp job. I did not try to convince them of my worth. Instead, I offered them a bright, polished smile. "You are absolutely right, Mom," I said smoothly. "I would never dream of burdening Malik with my problems. In fact, I think I have overstayed my welcome already." I set my nearly full wine glass down on the edge of the dining table. The sharp clink of the crystal against the wood made my father flinch slightly, his eyes narrowing at my sudden shift in demeanor. "I wish you all a truly lovely evening," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even and remarkably pleasant. "Good luck with your investors tonight, Malik. You are definitely going to need it." I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room, my posture straight and my head held high. I did not wait for their responses or their inevitable scoffs. I walked through the grand foyer, pushed open the heavy front doors, and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The lingering tension in my shoulders finally released as I walked down the long, sweeping driveway. I reached my car, a sleek and heavily tinted custom vehicle that I deliberately kept parked securely down the street to avoid drawing their suspicious eyes. I slid into the driver's seat, the quiet luxury of the interior wrapping around me like a protective shield. I did not start the engine right away. Instead, I reached into my designer bag and pulled out my iPad. The screen illuminated my face in the dim light of the car. I used my fingerprint to bypass the advanced security lock, opening a highly encrypted private banking portal that only a handful of people in the financial district even knew existed. My eyes scanned the digital documents waiting in my secure inbox. There it was, the official property deed to the prized family cabin in Martha's Vineyard. It was a stunning, historic piece of real estate right on the water, long considered the absolute crown jewel of my family's generational wealth. My grandfather, the only person in this entire family who ever saw my true potential, had left it entirely to me in a blind trust right before he passed away. Warren and Malik had always assumed the cabin was theirs by right, treating it as their personal summer playground and a crucial financial safety net. They had absolutely no idea my grandfather had legally transferred it to me to protect it from their reckless and arrogant spending habits. I pulled up the pending digital contract. A luxury resort developer had been aggressively trying to acquire the land for months, eager to bulldoze the old structure and build a massive vacation complex. The final offer was staggering, $6.5 million pure cash with an immediate closing date. I read through the final legal stipulations, thinking about my father's cruel words just moments ago. I thought about Brittany's racist laugh echoing in the dining room. I thought about my mother begging me not to ask for a handout while my brother secretly drowned in debt. I placed my finger on the screen and drew my digital signature. With a single click, I authorized the massive cash sale. The confirmation email arrived instantly, lighting up my screen with a green checkmark. The transaction was fully locked. The property was officially sold. I closed the iPad, tossed it onto the passenger seat, started my engine, and drove away from the estate, leaving them to their ignorant and fragile little world. They had absolutely no idea that the timer had just started, and their entire reality was about to come crashing down around them. The shift in momentum hits me the moment I step into my office. The penthouse suite at Apex Equity Partners is quiet, offering a stark contrast to the stifling tension of my parents' home. My lead attorney, Elias, is waiting for me near the floor-to-ceiling windows. He holds the finalized sale documents for the Martha's Vineyard cabin like he is handling a live grenade. Elias drops the bombshell before I can even pour my coffee. Warren and Malik did not just ignore the fact that Grandpa left that property entirely to me in a blind trust. 3 years ago, they actively forged my signature to use the cabin as collateral for a $3 million business loan. They needed that cash to prop up Malik's failing logistics company. They truly assumed I was too broke and too distracted by my supposed temp job to ever check the official property records. They thought the black sheep of the family would never notice her inheritance being bled dry. My heart hammers against my ribs, but my mind is already calculating the kill. Instead of just running to the police with evidence of their forgery, which would give them time to scramble and lie, I make a different call. I instruct Elias to use a shell corporation under Apex Equity to quietly buy up the predatory debt of Malik's logistics company. I do not just want to sell the cabin out from under them. I want to own the chain around their necks. I want to hold the power to dismantle their entire world whenever I choose. Over the next few days, my phone is a constant stream of abuse from my younger sister Jasmine. She texts me incessantly demanding I apologize to Dad for leaving the dinner so abruptly. She needs him in a good mood to pay for her upcoming summer trip to Paris, and she thinks my refusal to grovel is ruining her vacation plans. I do not bother with a lengthy explanation or an argument. I reply with a simple thumbs-up emoji, letting her believe I am just as pathetic and compliant as they always assumed. It is the perfect misdirection. By day 5, the countdown reaches its climax. I am sitting at my desk reviewing market fluctuations when Elias walks into the office, his expression remarkably calm despite the fire he is about to start. The cash from the cabin sale has cleared into my account. The title transfer has officially hit the banking system. The bank has just realized the collateral they held for Malik's loan is gone. My private line rings immediately. It is Malik. He is screaming so loud the phone is distorting his voice. He claims his black Amex was just declined at a luxury car dealership and that his business payroll accounts have been locked by the bank. He demands to know what I did to his accounts. I lean back in my chair looking out at the city skyline and I smile. I tell him in the softest voice I can muster that I just sold my cabin and I ask him why that would possibly affect his money. I can hear him hyperventilating on the other end. The panic is finally setting in. He realizes that if the cabin is sold, his collateral is gone, and the bank is coming for everything he has left. He hangs up on me, and for the first time in years, the power balance has completely shifted. I have waited long enough for this moment. They have lived off my inheritance and my silence for years, and now the time for secrets is over. Elias stands across from my desk, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp with the knowledge of what we have just set into motion. The confirmation of the transfer is secure in my hands. The money from the Martha's Vineyard cabin is safely locked within my private accounts, and the Shell Corporation operating under Apex Equity Partners now officially holds the predatory debt for my brother's failing logistics company. The trap is no longer just set, it has been perfectly sprung. I thank Elias, take a slow sip of my coffee, and look out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office. The sprawling city below moves at its usual frantic pace, but up here, there is only the quiet hum of absolute control. The anticipation running through my veins is a steady thrill. I know it will not take long for the fallout to begin. Banking algorithms are automated, ruthless, and incredibly fast. When a multi-million-dollar piece of collateral suddenly vanishes from a heavily leveraged commercial loan, the system does not pause to ask polite questions. It reacts instantly. Exactly 12 minutes after Elias leaves my office, my private cell phone rings. The caller ID flashes Malik's name. I lean back in my leather chair, letting the phone ring 3 times. I savor the sound, knowing exactly what it signifies, before I finally slide my finger across the screen to answer. I do not say hello. I just listen to the sound of shallow, panicked breathing on the other end of the line. Malik is practically hyperventilating. Through the receiver, I can hear the distinct echoing acoustics of a large showroom floor and the hushed, uncomfortable murmurs of sales associates in the background. He tells me his exclusive Black American Express card was just declined. He is standing in the middle of a luxury imported car dealership trying to purchase a brand new vehicle he absolutely cannot afford, and the transaction was denied in front of the general manager. He says he tried 3 other corporate cards, and every single one came back frozen. His voice is tight with humiliation and rising terror. He says the bank manager just called him directly, stating that his primary collateral was no longer valid, and that his accounts were locked pending a thorough investigation. Malik demands to know what I did. He is shouting now, causing a massive scene in a place where image and discretion are everything. I keep my voice light, breezy, and entirely unbothered. I feign perfect innocence. I tell him I have absolutely no idea what he is talking about. I mention casually that I just sold my cabin in Martha's Vineyard because I felt like a change of scenery, and the real estate market was incredibly favorable. I ask him, my tone dripping with fake confusion, why on earth my personal real estate transaction would have any effect on his massive, highly successful logistics empire. The silence on his end is deafening. I can practically hear the gears grinding to a halt in his head as the reality of his massive criminal mistake crashes down on him. He realizes I sold the exact property he illegally leveraged. He realizes the bank knows the asset is gone. Before he can even formulate a lie to cover his tracks, I hear a scuffle. The phone is snatched forcefully from his hand. Brittany's shrill, frantic voice fills my ear. She does not ask what is going on or try to understand the situation. She immediately launches into a vicious attack. Her tone is dripping with the kind of wealthy country club entitlement that always made my skin crawl. She tells me to listen to her very carefully. She accuses me of running some sort of ghetto scam to get back at them for being more successful than I could ever hope to be. She says I am ruining their pristine credit score and publicly humiliating them at the dealership over a petty, childish grudge. She demands that I call the bank immediately, confess that I made a clerical error with the property deed, and reverse the sale this instant. The audacity of her demands is genuinely breathtaking. She tells me I do not understand how high finance works. She says I am just a low-level temp worker who clicked the wrong button on a legal document, and that I am messing with adult money. She claims my natural hair and cheap clothes reflect my absolute lack of business acumen, and she threatens to have Warren call his elite lawyers to crush me if I do not fix this imaginary mistake within the hour. I let her rant. I let her expose every ounce of her racist, classist assumptions. I listen as she screams about how she needs that car to maintain her status, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire life is funded by fraud and forgery. I do not argue with her. I do not defend my intelligence, my career, or my legal rights. I do not tell her that I own the building she is currently standing in, or that my firm could buy and sell her entire bloodline before lunch. I simply pull the phone away from my ear and press the red end call button right in the middle of her screaming about her ruined luxury purchase. I tap her contact profile, select the block feature, and confirm. I do the same for Malik. I place the phone face down on my polished mahogany desk. The immediate silence in my office is profound and incredibly satisfying. I know exactly what is happening in that dealership right now. The sudden disconnect will drive them absolutely insane. Silence fuels paranoia better than any threat or argument ever could. They are currently standing in a high-end showroom, completely stripped of their purchasing power, realizing they have no way to reach the one person holding the keys to their financial survival. Their illusion of control has just been severed with a single tap of a screen. I turn my attention back to my computer monitors, calmly reviewing a new acquisition file as if my morning has not been interrupted at all. 10 minutes pass in absolute tranquility. Then my screen lights up with an urgent, high-priority text message from my father. Warren never texts me. He summons me through his assistants or demands my presence with aggressive phone calls. But this message contains an image attachment sent directly from his personal number. I open it to find a frantic screenshot of a federal banking notice. The message was sent directly to his primary personal and corporate accounts. The cross-collateralization fraud tied to the Martha's Vineyard cabin has done significantly more than just flag Malik's business loans. Because Warren secretly co-signed Malik's fraudulent loan and tied his own massive corporate assets to his son's failing venture, to hide the bleeding, the bank's automated fraud division has intervened at the highest level. The federal notice plainly states that due to suspected fraudulent collateral assignment and a severe breach of contract, an automatic indefinite freeze has been placed on all linked accounts. The entire family's assets are locked. Every personal checking account, every offshore savings fund, every corporate credit line, and every emergency reserve is frozen pending a full federal investigation. I stare at the screenshot of the federal notice tracing the stark bureaucratic language with my eyes. For 15 years, Warren had used his wealth as a weapon. He used his bank accounts to enforce loyalty, to punish independence, and to ensure that anyone who defied him was starved out of existence. He had built an empire on the absolute certainty that money meant power and that he held all the cards. Seeing his entire financial existence reduced to a locked screen error brings a wave of vindication so intense it almost takes my breath away. He thought he could invite me to Thanksgiving out of pity. He thought he could parade his golden child's imaginary success in front of me while mocking my supposed failures. He did not realize that while he was busy polishing his fragile ego, I was quietly buying the ground he stood on. The federal notice is just the beginning. The freeze is absolute, stopping all outgoing transfers, halting all payroll operations for the logistics company, and severing access to the very funds they use to maintain their lavish lifestyle. They cannot buy groceries, they cannot pay their country club dues, and they certainly cannot pay off the debt that is now legally owned by Apex Equity Partners. My phone vibrates again. Another text from Warren, this one consisting of just 3 words. Call me immediately. I do not call him. I leave the message on read, allowing him to see exactly when I view his demands and choose to ignore them. The panic is no longer isolated to Malik and Brittany at a car dealership. The entire dynasty is suffocating, and the real fallout has only just begun. The silence in my office lasted exactly 7 minutes before my phone lit up again. I watched the screen vibrate against the dark wood of my desk. This time, the caller ID did not display my father's name. It was my mother. I let it ring twice, taking a slow breath to center myself, smoothing a hand over the fabric of my tailored trousers. I pressed answer. I did not even get the chance to say hello before the sound of frantic, gasping sobs filled my ear. Valerie, the woman who had spent her entire life curating the flawless image of the unflappable, perfectly composed Buckhead matriarch, was completely falling apart. "Zora, please," she wailed, her voice cracking so violently I actually had to pull the phone an inch away from my ear. "You have to help us. You have to send us whatever you have. I know you only make temp wages, but if you have any meager savings stashed away, we need it right now. The bank is threatening to seize the estate. They are talking about federal charges." I sat perfectly still, listening to the sheer desperation pouring through the receiver. I kept my voice incredibly soft, injecting just enough fake confusion to push her over the edge. I asked her calmly why the bank would be seizing the main house over a simple business loan issue. That simple, calculated question was all it took to break down the dam. Panic makes people careless, and my mother was entirely consumed by it. Through her hysterical crying, she started babbling inadvertently, handing me the exact missing pieces of the puzzle I had suspected for years but could never fully prove. "Your father had to use the house," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a messy, chaotic rush. "He had to cross-collateralize the estate to hide what Malik did. Malik made some bad investments. He took money he was not supposed to take from his client accounts. It was embezzlement, Zora. If Warren had not covered it up with the family funds, your brother would have gone to federal prison. We had to protect the family name. We had to protect your brother. We sacrificed all of our liquidity to keep him safe, and now because that stupid cabin is gone, the bank is calling in the entire debt. We have nothing liquid left. Everything is locked. We cannot even buy groceries." I closed my eyes and let her confession wash over me. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. For 15 years, I had been lectured at every Thanksgiving and Christmas about my supposed lack of ambition. I had been called a failure and a disappointment because I refused to follow their rigid path. I had been thrown out of their home at 20 years old with nothing but a garbage bag full of my clothes because I dared to possess an independent thought. Meanwhile, the golden son they worshipped was a common thief. Malik had been stealing from his own clients, running his logistics company into the ground with his incompetence, and Warren had drained the family fortune to cover up his crimes. They had sacrificed their own financial security and broken federal laws just to maintain the illusion that Malik was a brilliant businessman. My mother did not pause to realize what she had just confessed. She did not stop to consider the massive legal implications of admitting to federal fraud on an unsecured phone line. She immediately pivoted to the only tactic she truly knew, which was emotional manipulation. She lowered her voice, trying to inject a tone of maternal disappointment through her tears, wielding guilt like a weapon she had honed over decades. "You owe us, Zora," she demanded, her crying shifting into a sharp, bitter edge. "We gave you everything. We clothed you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We raised you in a beautiful home, and this is how you repay us. You sell a property you know we use every summer just to be spiteful. You need to empty your savings account right now and wire us the money for a defense attorney. It is the absolute least you can do for this family after everything we have sacrificed for you." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished wood of my desk. The sheer entitlement radiating from her words extinguished any tiny, lingering flicker of sympathy I might have held. They genuinely believed I owed them my life just because they managed to keep me alive during my childhood. "I do not owe you a single dime, Valerie," I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register that stopped her crying instantly. "Providing food, clothes, and a roof over the head of a child you chose to bring into the world is not a favor. It is not a loan I am required to pay back. It is the basic legal and moral requirement of being a parent. You do not get a gold star for doing the bare minimum, and you certainly do not get to use it as leverage to bail out your felon of a son." The line went dead quiet for 3 seconds. When my mother finally spoke again, the mask of the desperate, loving parent was completely gone. She sounded vicious, showing the true, ugly colors she had always reserved for me behind closed doors. "You are exactly what your father always said you were," she hissed, the venom dripping from every syllable. "You are an ungrateful, spiteful disappointment. You have always been jealous of Malik. You have always hated seeing him succeed, because you know you will never amount to anything more than a bitter, lonely girl struggling to pay rent in a cheap apartment. You are a disgrace to this family, and you will die with nothing." Before I could formulate a response to her vitriol, there was a loud, aggressive scuffling sound on the other end of the line. The phone was forcefully yanked away. When the next voice spoke, it was Warren. He sounded eerily cold, stripped of the explosive shouting rage he usually relied on to get his way. It was the calculated, dead tone of a man who realized he was backed into a corner and was preparing to strike with everything he had left. "Listen to me very carefully, Zora," my father commanded. "I am calling an emergency mandatory family meeting at the main estate. I expect you to be standing in my living room tonight. If you refuse to show up, I will personally call the Atlanta Police Department. I will send them directly to your cheap little apartment, and I will have you arrested for real estate fraud. I will tell them you were the one who authorized that fraudulent loan 3 years ago, and I will make sure the detectives believe every single word I say. You will come here. You will sign a release form for that cabin tonight, or you will go to jail. Do you understand me?" I looked out the window at the sprawling city below me, a city where my firm owned multiple commercial high-rises and employed hundreds of top-tier financial analysts. I thought about the custom matte black Maybach waiting for me in the underground executive garage, polished and ready for my departure. I thought about the final red-stamped document currently sitting in Elias's leather briefcase, a piece of paper that held the power to eradicate their entire existence. I smiled, feeling a profound and dangerous sense of calm settle over my entire body. I pressed the phone closer to my mouth, making sure my enunciation was perfectly clear. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I replied, my voice light, breezy, and completely fearless. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Dress nicely." The drive from my penthouse office in downtown Atlanta to my parents' sprawling estate in Buckhead takes exactly 18 minutes. My chauffeur, Marcus, navigates the sweeping tree-lined curves of the ultra-wealthy neighborhood with practiced ease. The custom matte black exterior of my Maybach absorbs the glow of the streetlights gliding through the humid Georgia night like a shadow. Inside the cabin, the soundproofing is absolute. I sit in the buttery leather seat, resting my hand on the cool glass of a bottle of sparkling water, feeling a profound and unshakable sense of tranquility. I am not the terrified, desperate 20-year-old girl who was thrown out onto these very streets with a garbage bag full of clothes. I am a titan of industry returning to collect a long overdue debt. Marcus pulls into the long manicured circular driveway of my parents' property. He glides past Warren's prized vintage luxury sedans and Malik's leased flashy sports car, bringing my massive vehicle to a silent halt right at the front steps. He quickly steps out and opens my door. I step into the night air. I am not wearing the simple, understated outfit I wore to their disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. I am wearing a razor-sharp, impeccably tailored designer suit in stark, brilliant white. It is a visual statement of absolute authority, a deliberate contrast to the cheap, pathetic image they hold of me in their minds. My heels click rhythmically against the expensive cobblestone walkway. The heavy oak double doors of the grand estate are slightly ajar, clearly left open in someone's frantic, careless haste. I do not need to ring the doorbell or announce my arrival. I can hear the absolute chaos erupting from the front porch. The sound of their spectacular unraveling echoes through the massive marble foyer. It is a symphony of pure panic. I pause just outside the doorway, listening to the bitter, unfiltered reality of the Wilson family. Malik is screaming at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing harshly off the vaulted ceilings. He is blaming Warren, demanding to know why his father has not fixed the bank freeze yet. He is cursing about his ruined reputation at the dealership and his inability to pay his warehouse staff tomorrow morning. Valerie is sobbing hysterically, her voice shrill and grating. She is wailing about the country club, terrified that her wealthy socialite friends will discover their credit lines are frozen and their accounts are locked. She cries about the sheer unbearable humiliation of having a card declined at a high-end boutique earlier that afternoon. Warren is bellowing over both of them, his deep, commanding voice cracking with unprecedented stress. He is ordering them to shut up, insisting violently that he has a foolproof plan to fix the mess Malik created. They are so utterly consumed by their own spectacular collapse that they do not hear me push the heavy oak doors fully open. I step into the grand living room. The visual is striking. Warren, usually perfectly groomed and endlessly conscious of his presentation, looks completely disheveled. His expensive silk tie is ripped off, his collar is open, and a heavy sheen of sweat coats his forehead. Malik is pacing the length of the Persian rug like a caged animal, aggressively running his hands through his hair. Valerie is curled on the oversized white sectional sofa, clutching a soaked tissue to her face, her makeup entirely ruined. I stand in the center of the room, perfectly still, letting my silence command their attention. It takes them several seconds to notice me. When they finally do, the shouting dies, instantly replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. They stare at me. They take in the pristine white suit, the flawless posture, the quiet, undeniable confidence radiating from every single move I make. For a fraction of a second, I see genuine, unadulterated confusion in my father's eyes. He does not understand the powerful woman standing in front of him, but his desperate need for control quickly overpowers his observation skills. Warren charges toward the massive glass coffee table in the center of the room. He snatches up a thick stack of legal documents and slams them down onto the glass with a violent, echoing crack. He points a shaking, furious finger at the papers. "Sit down and sign this right now, Zora," he barks desperately, trying to summon the terrifying authority he wielded over me during my childhood. "This is a release of claim document. You are going to sign over all of your rights to the Martha's Vineyard cabin immediately. You are going to surrender the deed back to my corporate holding company tonight. You are going to call the Federal Bank tomorrow morning and tell them that your attempt to sell the property was a massive, illegal clerical error. You are going to fix your stupid, petty mistake so I can unfreeze my accounts and clean up this family's mess." I do not move towards the table. I just look at him, tilting my head slightly, observing him as if he is a fascinating psychological experiment. My absolute lack of compliance infuriates him. His face turns a dangerous mottled shade of red, and he takes a threatening step toward me. "Do not test me tonight," Warren hisses, lowering his voice into a vicious, menacing growl. "I am giving you one chance to walk away from this cleanly. If you do not pick up that pen and sign that release right now, I will make one phone call to the Atlanta Police Department. I have close friends in the financial fraud division. I will tell them that you are the one who authorized the fraudulent loan against the cabin 3 years ago. I will swear under oath that you forged the family documents, took the $3 million, and hid the stolen money to fund your pathetic, miserable life. I will tell them you are a desperate, unhinged temp worker trying to extort your highly successful family. He leans closer, his eyes wide and frantic. Who do you think the detectives are going to believe, Zora, a highly respected, wealthy business mogul, or a bitter girl living paycheck to paycheck in a cheap apartment? You will be in handcuffs before midnight, and I will personally make sure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison cell. Malik steps up right behind Warren, puffing out his chest and crossing his arms. He tries to look imposing, playing the role of the loyal soldier backing up the king. He glares at me, his eyes full of the same toxic spite and arrogance he has carried his entire life. You heard him. Malik spits out his tone, dripping with condescension. You thought you could pull a fast one and ruin my company. You thought you could mess with my high-level investors? You are nothing, Zora. You have always been nothing. Sign the damn paper and get out of our house before Dad destroys your entire life. They stand there, breathing heavily, completely and utterly convinced of their own supremacy. They truly believe they hold the power of life and death over my future. They expect me to crumble under the weight of their intimidation. They expect me to burst into tears, to drop to my knees, and to desperately beg for their mercy. They expect the terrified 20-year-old girl they abused and abandoned to surrender everything to save herself from their fabricated wrath. I do not sit down, I do not flinch, I do not raise my voice by a single decibel. I reach into my structured imported leather handbag and smoothly pull out a thick, heavy, leather-bound dossier. It is the portfolio Elias prepared for me, containing every irrefutable piece of evidence regarding their financial ruin, my acquisition of their predatory debt, and the legal transfer of my assets. I step forward, my heels clicking sharply against the floor. I drop the heavy leather dossier directly onto the glass coffee table. It lands right on top of his worthless release of claim document with a heavy, absolute, and final thud. I look Warren dead in the eyes, my expression a mask of chilling, unbreakable calm. I can't release the cabin, Dad. It's already demolished. The resort developers broke ground this morning. The silence that follows my declaration is absolute. It is a thick, suffocating vacuum that swallows all the oxygen in the room. Warren stares at me, his mouth slightly open, his mind completely incapable of processing the words I just spoke. The concept of a demolition of bulldozers, tearing through the ancestral crown jewel he used to leverage his entire fraudulent house of cards, fundamentally breaks his brain. Malik physically stumbles backward, his knees hitting the edge of a velvet armchair. He looks like all the blood has been drained from his body. Then the room erupts. It is not Warren who charges at me. It is Brittany. The polished country club facade she wears like a suit of armor instantly vaporizes, revealing the vicious, desperate woman hiding underneath. She stomps across the Persian rug, the heels of her designer shoes digging into the expensive fabric. She marches right up to me, invading my personal space, her face flushed a dark mottled red. The cloying scent of her imported floral perfume washes over me, heavy and suffocating. She points a sharply manicured finger directly in my face, stopping mere inches from my nose. "You are so stupid," she screams, her voice cracking with unhinged rage. "You are completely incompetent, Zora. You cannot sell a property that has a massive commercial lien on it. The bank holds the deed. You do not hold the deed. You cannot just authorize a demolition on a leveraged asset. Did you even go to college? Did you learn absolutely nothing when you rejected your father's business path to go study whatever useless degree you got? You have ruined everything because you are too ignorant to understand how adult finances operate." She is breathing heavily, her chest heaving, fully expecting me to cower. She expects me to realize I have made a colossal legal mistake. She expects the dynamic to remain exactly as it has always been, with her sneering down at the uneducated, unsophisticated black sheep of the family. I do not flinch. I do not take a step back. I look her dead in the eye, my expression perfectly serene. I reach back into my structured leather bag. My fingers wrap around a second much thinner folder. It is a sleek black portfolio I had Elias put together specifically for this exact moment. I pull it out and hold it up, resting it gently against her pointed, trembling finger. I understand the situation perfectly, Brittany. I say, my voice steady, cold and echoing clearly in the sudden quiet of the living room. I understand exactly how commercial liens work. I understand that a blind trust legally supersedes a forged signature on a fraudulent loan application. I understand that the bank never actually held the deed because Warren never possessed the legal authority to sign it over to them in the first place. I lower the folder and press it firmly against her chest, forcing her to take it. She grips it instinctively, her eyes darting frantically between me and the black cover. Just like I understand that your parents went bankrupt in 2024. I continue, my words landing like physical blows in the quiet room. Brittany freezes. The color instantly drains from her flushed cheeks, leaving her looking sickly and hollow. She opens her mouth to speak, but no sound comes out. I take a slow, deliberate step forward, forcing her to step back. I know all about it, Brittany. I know that the grand old money trust fund you constantly brag about to your snobby country club friends is completely empty. I know your father lost his entire generational wealth in a series of disastrous real estate gambles 3 years ago. I know your parents' estate in Connecticut was quietly foreclosed on, and that they currently rent a modest condo under a shell name to hide their utter financial ruin from their social circle. You have been playing the role of the wealthy superior heiress, while secretly having absolutely nothing to your name. Valerie gasps from the sofa. Warren turns his head, staring at his daughter-in-law with an expression of complete shock. Brittany has always presented herself as their equal, a woman of impeccable pedigree who graced Malik with her presence. The revelation that she is a broke fraud shatters the fragile social hierarchy of the room. But I am not finished. Exposing her fake wealth is just the appetizer. The real destruction is in the details. You needed a way to maintain the illusion, I say, speaking in a rapid-fire clinical cadence. You needed someone to fund your shopping sprees, your luxury spa weekends, and your pathetic need to feel superior to everyone around you. Malik was desperate to keep you happy, and he needed cash to keep his own failing business afloat. So he started taking it. He started skimming from his client accounts. He started pulling thousands of dollars a week from corporate payroll funds, and you knew exactly where that money was coming from. Brittany shakes her head rapidly, her eyes wide with terror. She tries to shove the folder back at me, but I refuse to take it. You are lying, she stammers, her voice dropping to a panicked, breathless whisper. You are making this up. Open the folder, Brittany. I command, projecting my voice so it reverberates off the high ceiling. Open it and look at the highlighted lines. She does not move, so I read the contents to her from memory. I detail the exact transactions. I list the $80,000 transfer to her personal checking account last November, labeled as a consulting fee for a company she does not even own. I list the $45,000 charge at the Cartier boutique in Paris, paid directly from Malik's corporate expense account. I list the monthly country club dues, the luxury car leases, and the private jet charters, all of it funded by money stolen directly from innocent investors. You thought you were just spending your husband's money? I say, stepping even closer, closing the distance until she has nowhere left to retreat. But you are not just a spoiled housewife, Brittany. You are an active participant in a federal crime. You knowingly received stolen funds. You funneled embezzled corporate money through your personal accounts to hide the origin. You signed joint tax returns claiming fraudulent income. That makes you legally tied to the fraud. It makes you an accessory to grand larceny and federal embezzlement. The air in the room turns frigid. The reality of federal prison is no longer an abstract concept floating around Malik and Warren. It has just landed squarely on Brittany's shoulders. She has spent years looking down on me, mocking my career, and judging my worth based on her fabricated pedigree. Now she realizes she is staring down the barrel of a multi-count federal indictment. You are going to lose the country club, I tell her, my voice dropping to a soft, lethal whisper. You are going to lose the cars, the jewelry, and the illusion of superiority. But worse than that, you are going to lose your freedom. When the federal investigators trace the routing numbers in that folder, they are not just going to arrest Malik, they are going to arrest you. Brittany turns absolutely ghost white. Her hands begin to tremble so violently that she can no longer hold on to the black portfolio. The folder slips from her fingers, dropping to the floor. It hits the ground and bursts open. Dozens of pages spill out across the expensive Persian rug. They are copies of highly classified bank statements, wire transfer logs, and encrypted communication records. Every single page features thick, bright yellow highlighter marks outlining every illegal transaction, every stolen dollar, and every piece of damning evidence tying her directly to the crime. Malik stares at the scattered papers, his jaw completely unhinged. He looks from the highlighted bank statements to me, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. He did not know I had her financial records. He did not know I possessed the capability to breach their secure accounts, bypass their encrypted barriers, and document their crimes with such ruthless precision. The realization that I have been watching them, tracking them, and building an airtight case against them for years finally crushes the last remaining shred of his arrogance. He realizes the sister he mocked as a helpless temp worker is actually the architect of his absolute destruction. Warren opens his mouth to shout something, his face twisting into a mask of pure, desperate fury, but the words never leave his throat. Before anyone in the living room can speak, before Valerie can scream, before Malik can attempt to gather the scattered evidence off the floor, a sound shatters the heavy tension in the house. The doorbell rings. It is not a polite quick chime. It is followed immediately by a series of aggressive heavy thuds against the thick oak wood of the front doors. It is the unmistakable rhythmic pounding of absolute authority, the kind of knock that demands immediate entry. The sound echoes through the grand foyer, freezing everyone in the living room in place. The timer has hit 0, the reckoning has officially arrived at their doorstep. The heavy, aggressive thuds against the front door echo through the grand estate, shattering the stunned silence left in the wake of my revelation. Warren snaps his head toward the foyer, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated outrage. In his world, no one knocks on his door with such blatant disrespect. To Warren, his home is an impenetrable fortress, a monument to his power and influence, where visitors are expected to display absolute reverence. The sheer audacity of the pounding is an insult he cannot stomach, especially not when he is already vibrating with the fury of being entirely outmaneuvered by the daughter he considers to be so far beneath him. He storms past me, his heavy footsteps thudding against the imported hardwood floor, muttering vicious threats under his breath. He promises to fire the security guards at the front gate for letting some insolent delivery driver or confused trespassing neighbor onto his pristine property. He reaches the massive double oak doors and yanks them open with enough force to rattle the expensive stained glass panels. He takes a deep breath, fully preparing to unleash a torrent of verbal abuse that would strip the skin off whoever is standing on his porch. But the words never materialize. The aggressive tirade dies instantly in his throat, replaced by a sharp, shallow gasp. Standing under the warm glow of the porch lights are not confused neighbors or lost delivery workers. There are 3 men, and their presence instantly sucks the remaining oxygen out of the grand foyer. They are dressed in severe, dark windbreakers, their faces carved from stone radiating an aura of absolute, uncompromising authority. Their federal badges are already out gleaming under the expensive crystal chandelier hanging above the entryway. They do not wait for Warren to invite them inside. They do not ask for permission, nor do they wipe their shoes on the monogrammed welcome mat. They step straight over the threshold, moving with synchronized, practiced precision, physically forcing my father to take a stumbling step backward into his own home. The lead investigator, a tall, broad-shouldered man, with eyes like chipped flint, scans the room instantly. He does not care about the sweeping staircase, the priceless art on the walls, or the illusion of untouchable wealth this family has spent decades cultivating. He only sees targets. The cold night air rushes in behind them, swirling around the opulent living room and chilling the sweat on Warren's forehead. "Warren Williams," the lead investigator asks. It is not a question. It is a confirmation of a fact he already knows. Warren tries to straighten his spine, desperately attempting to summon the arrogant, untouchable business mogul persona he relies on. He opens his mouth to demand their names, to threaten them with his highly paid legal team, to mention his personal connections to the mayor or the chief of police. But his voice entirely fails him. He only manages a weak, trembling nod. The investigator does not blink. He reaches into the interior pocket of his dark jacket and pulls out a thick, tightly folded stack of official legal documents. He presses the first stack directly into Warren's chest, forcing my father to reflexively grab them before they hit the floor. Without waiting for Warren to process the paperwork, the lead investigator steps past him, walking deliberately into the center of the living room. He approaches Malik, who is still standing completely frozen near the shattered remnants of Brittany's fake wealth, his eyes darting frantically between the spilled bank statements on the rug and the federal agents invading his home. The investigator hands Malik a matching stack of documents. The sound of the crisp paper rustling in the deadly quiet room is deafening. Warren and Malik Williams. The lead investigator says, his voice projecting with loud, clinical clarity that leaves no room for argument or denial. You are hereby officially served. These subpoenas command your immediate compliance in an ongoing federal investigation regarding multiple coordinated counts of felony bank fraud, interstate wire fraud, and the deliberate forgery of a signature on a highly leveraged commercial loan agreement. The words hit the room like a physical shockwave. Bank fraud, wire fraud, forgery. It is the holy trinity of financial ruin spoken aloud by the federal government in the middle of their sacred, pristine living room. The reality of the situation finally pierces through Warren's thick armor of arrogance. The authoritarian facade he has worn for his entire life simply shatters, breaking into a million jagged pieces. The illusion of his supreme power evaporates in the span of a single heartbeat. His knees visibly buckle beneath him. The man who ruled his family through fear and financial manipulation drops like a stone, his hands blindly grasping for the edge of the mahogany console table to stop himself from hitting the marble floor. He clings to the polished wood, his knuckles turning white, his chest heaving as he gasps for air. He looks ancient, pathetic, and utterly broken. From her spot on the white sectional sofa, Valerie watches her husband collapse. The pristine Buckhead matriarch who just minutes ago was screaming at me to drain my meager savings to save her social status finally comprehends the absolute finality of this moment. The bank is not just threatening to seize the estate. The federal government is preparing to take her husband and her golden child away in handcuffs. She lets out a piercing, guttural scream. It is a raw, hideous sound of pure terror, completely stripped of her usual refined elegance. She buries her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, rocking back and forth as the perfect, wealthy life she worshipped is torn to shreds right in front of her eyes. And then there is my younger sister, Jasmine. I shift my gaze to the far corner of the grand living room where she has retreated into the shadows. While her parents are having a total psychological breakdown and her brother is holding federal subpoenas, Jasmine's only instinct is pure, unadulterated self-preservation of her shallow social image. She is not rushing to comfort her mother or check on her father. She has shrunk into the corner, illuminated entirely by the harsh blue glow of her smartphone screen. Her thumbs are moving with frantic, desperate speed. I watch as she aggressively deletes photos off her Instagram account. She is scrubbing pictures of the Martha's Vineyard cabin, untagging herself from posts featuring Malik's logistics company, and erasing any digital connection to the family's wealth. She is deleting the yacht trips and the designer bags she proudly flaunted, desperately trying to pretend she had no idea they were funded by stolen money. She is terrified of the impending public scandal, completely consumed by the fear that her wealthy influencer friends will associate her with a federal crime family. It is a pathetic, deeply revealing display of the rot at the core of their entire existence. They do not actually care about each other. They only care about how they are perceived by the outside world. Malik is clutching the subpoena so tightly that the thick paper is crumpling in his hands. He looks at the federal agents, his chest rising and falling in rapid, panicked breaths. He looks at his father, who is still gasping on his knees, and then at Brittany, who is silently weeping on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of her own complicity. Malik realizes that there is no one left to save him. The family money is frozen, his father is powerless, and his lies have caught up to him. So he resorts to the only survival tactic he has ever truly mastered: absolute cowardice. Just like when we were children, and he would break his own toys only to blame me, so I would take the punishment. He betrays the only person left in the room he thinks he can still bully. Malik violently thrusts his trembling arm into the air and points his finger directly at me. He completely ignores the mountain of evidence sitting on the glass table. He ignores the facts. He just starts screaming, his voice shrill and breaking with blind terror. "It was her!" he bellows, spit flying from his lips as he steps toward the investigators, desperately trying to redirect their focus. "You have the wrong people. She is the one you want. She is the one who just sold the property out from under us today. She must be the one who signed the commercial loan in the first place. She set all of this up to ruin my business. She is trying to frame us. Arrest her." He continues to scream, weaving a frantic, incoherent web of lies, fully expecting the agents to instantly tackle the unloved black sheep daughter to the ground just because the golden boy commanded it. I do not flinch. I do not step back. I do not even dignify his pathetic, treacherous outburst with a response. I remain standing exactly where I am, my posture perfect in my pristine white suit, radiating a cold, untouchable calm that starkly contrasts with the absolute hysteria consuming my bloodline. The lead investigator does not rush toward me. He does not draw a pair of handcuffs. He watches Malik's pathetic, flailing display without a single flicker of emotion on his hardened face. He lets Malik scream until his voice gives out, letting the sheer desperation of his lies hang in the heavy air. Slowly, methodically, the agent reaches into his pocket and retrieves a small, spiral-bound notepad. He flips it open, his eyes scanning a specific line of text written on the page. He clicks his pen once, a sharp sound that somehow cuts right through Valerie's sobbing. The investigator turns his gaze away from my blubbering brother and looks directly at me. He takes in my tailored suit, my steady breathing, and the absolute lack of fear in my eyes. "Are you Zora Williams?" "Yes," I say, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the heavy, suffocated air of the living room. "I am Zora Williams." The lead investigator nods, his expression entirely unreadable. But before he can utter another word, the fragile, toxic alliance of the Williams family completely and spectacularly shatters. Brittany, still sitting on the floor, surrounded by the damning, bright yellow, highlighted evidence of her complicity, suddenly snaps. She looks at the federal badges gleaming under the chandelier, looks at the scattered bank statements proving she spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of embezzled money, and makes a split-second, ruthless calculation. She realizes the ship is going down in flames, and she absolutely refuses to drown with the captain. She scrambles backward, pushing herself away from the spilled papers as if they have suddenly caught fire. She scrambles to her feet, her expensive heels slipping clumsily on the Persian rug, and she points a shaking, manicured finger directly at her husband's chest. "I knew nothing about this!" Brittany shrieks, her voice reaching a hysterical, glass-shattering pitch. She does not look at me. She looks squarely at the federal agents, her eyes wide with manufactured terror. I had absolutely no idea where that money was coming from. Malik handled all of the finances. He handled every single account. He told me his logistics business was thriving. He told me we were incredibly wealthy. He lied to me for years. Malik physically recoils, his jaw dropping as he stares at the woman who just minutes ago was viciously defending their shared status and demanding I fix their credit score. The betrayal hits him like a physical blow to the chest, leaving him temporarily speechless. Brittany does not stop. She leans into the performance, adopting the persona of a fragile, ignorant, completely victimized housewife. She presses her hands to her chest, tears streaming down her face, entirely ruining her perfect makeup. "He forced me to sign those joint tax returns," she wails, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "He would just put stacks of paperwork in front of me and tell me to sign them, or he would cut off my allowance. I never read them. I do not know how to read corporate ledgers. I am just a mother trying to maintain a home for our children. He used me. He used my personal checking accounts to hide his dirty money without my consent. You cannot arrest me for his crimes. I am a victim here. The sheer breathtaking speed of her betrayal leaves the room in stunned silence. Valerie stops her own sobbing for a brief second, staring at her daughter-in-law in absolute horror. Warren's eyes narrow into dangerous, calculating slits, realizing that the family unity he prized above all else is nothing but dust. Brittany has just handed the federal government the intent and the motive on a silver platter, completely throwing Malik under the bus to save her own skin. The lead investigator writes something down in his small notepad, his face entirely devoid of sympathy. He does not offer Brittany a tissue or a comforting word. He simply records her frantic, self-incriminating confession. Malik snaps out of his shocked paralysis. His face turns a vibrant, dangerous shade of purple. He realizes his wife has just given the authorities all the ammunition they need to lock him away, and he is entirely out of options. Cornered, desperate, and sweating profusely, he pivots his rage back to the original target. He turns his frantic, bloodshot eyes back to me, deciding that if he is going to go down, he is going to drag me straight to hell with him. "Do not listen to her," Malik shouts at the investigators, waving his arms erratically. He steps closer to the agents, his voice cracking with panic. "My wife is hysterical. She does not know what she is talking about, and you definitely cannot listen to her." He thrusts a finger back in my direction, his chest heaving. "Zora orchestrated this entire thing. This is a setup. It is a massive, coordinated frame job." The investigators simply watch him, their silence inviting him to continue. Malik takes the bait, launching into a rapid, sweat-drenched monologue of easily disprovable lies. He paces the floor, his designer shirt clinging to his back, speaking so fast his words begin to slur together. "You have to understand the family dynamics," Malik pleads, adopting a desperate, conspiratorial tone with the federal agents. "My sister is a bitter, unstable woman. My father cut her off financially 15 years ago because she refused to contribute to the family legacy. She was kicked out of this house. She has been struggling for years, working dead-end administrative temp jobs, barely scraping by in a cheap, run-down apartment on the bad side of town. She has always been fiercely, violently jealous of my success. She has always hated me because I built a massive logistics empire while she amounted to absolutely nothing." I stand perfectly still, my hands resting lightly at my sides. I do not cross my arms. I do not roll my eyes. I maintain an expression of serene, mild interest, as if I am watching a mildly entertaining theatrical performance, rather than my own brother attempting to send me to federal prison. "She wanted revenge." Malik continues, his voice growing louder, more frantic as he tries to sell the narrative. "She wanted to destroy my business and steal our wealth. Somehow she managed to hack into my corporate servers. She committed identity theft. She stole my personal information, she forged my father's signature, and she used her low-level access to initiate that fraudulent loan against the family cabin. She funneled the $3 million into offshore accounts and pinned the paper trail on me, that highlighted folder on the floor. She manufactured those documents to frame my wife. You have to arrest her. You have to put her in handcuffs right now. She is a dangerous, calculating criminal masquerading as a victim." He finishes his rant, gasping for air, a line of spittle forming at the corner of his mouth. He looks at the agents with wide, pleading eyes, fully expecting them to instantly tackle me to the marble floor and read me my rights. He expects his wealth, his gender, and his practiced arrogance to carry the day, just as they always have. Warren tries to step forward, raising a hand. He is a seasoned businessman, and he recognizes exactly what Malik is doing. He knows that speaking to federal agents without legal counsel is a catastrophic mistake. He knows that lying to them is an entirely separate felony. But Warren is too slow, and his authority has already been broken. I watch Malik sweat. I watch his eyes dart around the room, searching for any sign that his massive, incoherent web of lies has taken hold. I do not say a single word in my own defense. I do not need to. I know that the federal government does not issue subpoenas based on sibling rivalry. I know they have already traced every single wire transfer, every IP address, and every encrypted signature directly to Malik's personal devices. I know they have thoroughly investigated Apex Equity Partners, and they know exactly who I am. I let Malik dig his grave so incredibly deep that he will never ever be able to climb out. I let him confidently make false statements to federal officers on the official record, adding years to his inevitable prison sentence with every panicked breath he takes. The silence stretches out thick and heavy as the desperate echoes of Malik's accusations fade into the vaulted ceiling. The lead investigator does not move toward me. He does not reach for his handcuffs. He slowly lowers his pen and looks at my brother. The agent's expression is no longer just hardened professionalism. It has shifted into a look of profound, unadulterated pity. It is the look a predator gives to a completely defenseless, uncomprehending prey right before the final strike. The investigator raises a single calm hand, halting Malik before he can launch into another frantic verse of his fabricated story. "Sir, you seem confused," the investigator says, his deep voice carrying a chilling, absolute certainty that completely silences the room. He looks Malik dead in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "Ms. Williams didn't commit the fraud." The lead investigator does not break eye contact with my brother. His voice is flat, devoid of any theatricality, which only makes the absolute certainty of his words cut deeper into the stagnant air of the living room. "Ms. Williams is the individual whose legal team originally flagged your forged signature on the commercial loan agreement." The investigator continues, his tone clinical and precise. "We have been working in direct coordination with her corporate counsel for the past 48 hours to secure these indictments. Furthermore, for the sake of clarity on the official record, Ms. Zora Williams is the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Equity Partners. That is the private equity firm that currently owns the entirety of your corporate debt, your logistics company's outstanding liabilities, and the primary commercial lien on this estate." The room goes dead silent. It is a thick, suffocating vacuum that instantly swallows every ounce of oxygen in the grand space. The words hang in the air, vibrating with an undeniable catastrophic weight. CEO, Apex Equity Partners. They are not just titles or corporate entities. They are the literal instruments of the Wilson family's absolute financial execution. Warren stares at me. His mouth opens, then closes, then opens again, but his vocal cords are entirely paralyzed. For 15 years, my father has worshipped exclusively at the altar of money dominance and corporate supremacy. He has measured every single human interaction by a brutal calculation of leverage and net worth. Now, standing in the ruins of his own kingdom, his brain fundamentally short-circuits. He cannot reconcile the terrified, penniless 20-year-old girl he threw out onto the street with the ruthless billionaire venture capitalist standing in his living room. He looks at me, truly looks at me for the first time in his life. The sheer magnitude of his miscalculation physically breaks him. The authoritarian facade, the booming voice, the terrifying presence that dictated the terms of my childhood, it all disintegrates into a fine, worthless powder. He realizes with a crushing, agonizing clarity that every threat he made tonight was an empty, pathetic joke. He threatened to call the police on the very woman who had meticulously handed the federal government the exact evidence needed to put his golden son behind bars. He threatened to crush a woman who had already bought his entire world for pennies on the dollar. Malik stumbles backward. The remaining strength in his legs completely gives out. He falls heavily onto the white sectional couch, his body sinking into the plush cushions right beside his mother. He covers his face with his trembling hands, his fingers digging into his scalp. He is the golden boy no longer. He is just a cornered, desperate felon staring down a decade in a federal penitentiary, outplayed and outmaneuvered by the sister he spent his entire life mocking as a failure. Valerie stops her hysterical sobbing for just a fraction of a second. The sound of the words, "Chief Executive Officer," pierces through her panic, triggering the shallow materialistic instincts that govern her entire existence. Her tear-streaked face turns slowly toward me. She blinks her eyes, scanning my figure, finally processing the visual information she had been too arrogant to register when I first walked through the door. She sees the brilliant white, impeccably tailored designer suit that costs more than a standard luxury vehicle. She looks down and sees the custom-imported Italian leather shoes anchoring my stance. Finally, her wide, bloodshot eyes land on my left wrist. She spots the custom-crafted platinum luxury timepiece peeking out from beneath my tailored sleeve. It is a subtle, ultra-exclusive piece of hardware, a quiet marker of generational-level wealth that completely dwarfs the flashy leased jewelry her husband and son wear to project fake success. Valerie covers her mouth with both hands, an audible gasp escaping her throat. The daughter she just mocked as a pathetic temp worker, the woman she viciously ordered to drain her meager savings to bail out a criminal, is a billionaire. The realization washes over her face an ugly mixture of profound shock, agonizing regret, and a deeply ingrained sickening reverence for the very wealth I now possess. I stand perfectly still in the center of the Persian rug, letting the crushing, suffocating weight of their new reality settle over them. I do not smile. I do not gloat. I do not utter a single word of triumph. My absolute silence is the heaviest, most devastating weapon in the room, confirming their total and irreversible destruction. Suddenly, a blur of motion catches the corner of my eye. Jasmine, who has been hiding in the shadows, frantically scrubbing her social media presence to distance herself from the impending scandal, senses the massive tectonic shift in power. Her survival instincts kick into overdrive. She does the rapid callous math in her head. Malik is going to prison. Warren is facing complete bankruptcy and potential conspiracy charges. Valerie is about to become a penniless social pariah. Brittany is caught in the crosshairs of a federal embezzlement scheme. The ship is completely submerged, but there is one single gleaming lifeboat left in the water. Jasmine abandons her spot in the corner and practically sprints across the living room. She ignores the federal agent, steps right over the highlighted evidence scattered on the floor, and lunges directly at me. She grabs my left arm, wrapping her manicured hands tightly around the pristine white fabric of my sleeve. She looks up at me, her face arranged into a mask of desperate manufactured adoration. "Zora, I always knew it," Jasmine babbles, her voice pitched high, vibrating with a sickeningly sweet, frantic energy. "I always knew you were a genius. I told them they were wrong about you. I told Mom and Dad that they should have never treated you that way. I always defended you when you weren't here. You have to take me with you, Zora. I cannot stay here with them. They are criminals. They lied to all of us. Please let me come live with you. We can be real sisters again. I can help you with your company." I look down at her hands gripping my suit. I look at her wide, calculating eyes. I do not feel an ounce of anger toward my younger sister. I only feel a profound, chilling disgust. She is a parasite, a creature entirely devoid of loyalty, desperately seeking a new host to fund her shallow, empty existence. I do not raise my voice. I do not break my posture. Slowly, methodically, I raise my right hand. I place my fingers over hers. I grip her hands with an icy, unyielding strength, and I physically peel her fingers off my arm one by one. The rejection is absolute and undeniable. I push her hands away, taking a deliberate half-step back to ensure there is a clear physical boundary between us. "Do not ever touch me again, Jasmine." I state, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register that freezes her in place. "You did not defend me. You sat in this exact room and laughed while they tore me apart. You enjoyed my absence because it meant more money for your designer bags and your pathetic social climbing. You are not my sister. You are exactly like them, and you will stay right here and face the consequences of the lifestyle you so happily consumed." Jasmine shrinks back, her face crumpling in genuine shock, as the last door to her salvation is permanently slammed shut in her face. Before Valerie can attempt her own desperate plea, and before the federal agents can issue their final instructions to Warren and Malik, the heavy double doors of the grand foyer swing fully open. The sound of confident, measured, heavy footsteps echoes sharply against the marble floor. The federal agents instinctively turn their heads toward the entryway, their hands resting cautiously near their belts. Elias, my lead corporate attorney, walks into the grand living room. He does not flinch at the sight of the federal investigators. He completely ignores my weeping mother, my paralyzed father, and the shattered remnants of my siblings. He moves with the precision of a man who commands every room he enters, his tailored charcoal suit cutting a sharp silhouette against the chaotic backdrop of the Wilson estate. Elias walks directly to the center of the room and stops right beside me, presenting a unified, impenetrable front of absolute legal and corporate dominance. He reaches into his leather briefcase, his expression devoid of any sympathy or hesitation. In his hand, he holds a single thick legal document, tightly bound and formally sealed. He holds the document up, turning it so the bright overhead chandelier light catches the surface of the paper. The front page bears a massive, undeniable, freshly stamped red seal. Elias moves with the calculated predatory grace of a top-tier corporate litigator who knows he has already won the war before the first shot is even fired. He does not rush. He does not acknowledge the federal agents who step slightly to the side, their sharp eyes recognizing a legal shark entering the feeding frenzy. The investigators are here to execute the criminal destruction of the Williams family. Elias is here to finalize the civil execution. He stops exactly one step behind my right shoulder, reinforcing my absolute authority, without uttering a single syllable. He rests his sleek, monogrammed briefcase on the edge of a marble side table. The metallic click of the latches snapping open sounds like a judge's gavel in the breathless, suffocating silence of the living room. He extracts a thick, tightly bound legal folio. The paper is heavy, expensive, and blindingly white, completely dominating the visual space as he brings it forward. Stamped across the front page in brilliant, unforgiving red ink are the words, "Notice of default and immediate asset forfeiture." Elias steps past the shattered remnants of Brittany's fake wealth, past the cowering form of my brother, and places the document directly onto the glass coffee table, right in front of where my father is still gripping the console table for physical support. "Mr. Williams." Elias begins, his voice perfectly modulated, smooth and lethal. "My name is Elias Vance. I am the Chief Legal Counsel for Apex Equity Partners. My firm represents the Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Zora Williams, in all matters regarding corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers." Warren stares at the document, his chest heaving, his mind violently rejecting the reality unfolding in his sanctuary. He cannot process the words. He cannot connect the elegant, terrifying attorney standing in his home with the daughter he discarded like trash. Elias does not wait for an invitation to continue. He delivers the financial autopsy with ruthless surgical precision. Over the past 8 months, Apex Equity Partners has systematically acquired the entirety of your corporate and personal debt portfolios. When your son's logistics company began hemorrhaging capital due to what federal investigators will soon prove to be rampant, unchecked embezzlement, you attempted to hide the bleeding. You could not allow your social circle, your country club peers, or your investors to know that your golden child was running a failing enterprise into the ground. You did not have the liquid capital to cover his massive shortfalls. Elias continues, his words slicing through the room, exposing the rotting foundation of their false empire. So you leveraged your remaining assets. You co-signed a fraudulent loan against the Martha's Vineyard property, utilizing forged signatures to bypass the trust restrictions. But $3 million was not enough to plug the black hole Malik had created, was it, Warren? The embezzlement was too deep. The debts were too vast. Warren's breath hitches. A sickening wet sound escapes his throat as Elias drags his deepest, darkest secret into the harsh light of the room. To secure the extended lines of credit necessary to keep your son out of prison, you quietly cross-collateralized that fraudulent loan with the deed to this primary estate. Elias states, gesturing broadly around the opulent, high-ceilinged room. You tied the survival of your flagship company and the roof over your family's head directly to a loan built entirely on federal fraud. You assumed you could quickly out-earn the debt before anyone noticed the irregularities. You assumed wrong. Valerie lets out a high, thin wail, her hands clawing at the expensive white upholstery of the sectional sofa. The word deed has finally penetrated her panic. The realization that her sanctuary, the physical manifestation of her supreme social status, was secretly gambled away by her husband, sends her into a state of absolute catatonic shock. She looks around the room as if the walls are suddenly going to evaporate, leaving her exposed to the harsh elements of poverty she has spent her entire life mocking. Malik shrinks further into the cushions, his eyes wide and hollow. He finally understands the catastrophic ripple effect of his theft. He did not just ruin his own life. His incompetence and greed forced his father to risk the entire generational wealth of the family, and they both lost everything. When the forensic accountants at Apex Equity Partners flagged the forged signatures on the Martha's Vineyard loan, it triggered an immediate, non-negotiable acceleration clause. Elias explains his tone completely devoid of mercy. A default on that specific loan automatically triggered a default on all cross-collateralized assets. The holding bank had absolutely no desire to entangle themselves in a messy, highly publicized federal fraud investigation involving your son. They wanted to wash their hands of the Williams family entirely. So Apex Equity Partners purchased the entirety of your debt at a premium. We bought the paper. Elias leans forward slightly, tapping a manicured finger against the red stamped document on the glass table. Because you defaulted on a cross-collateralized fraudulent loan, the terms of forfeiture are absolute and immediate. There is no grace period, there is no negotiation, there is no appeals process to save your assets. As of 9 o'clock this morning, the deed to this estate, the holding company that controls your corporate accounts and all the remaining liquid assets tied to your name, were legally transferred to Apex Equity Partners. Warren slowly, agonizingly pulls his eyes away from Elias and looks down at the glass table. His hands release their death grip on the console table. He reaches out, his fingers shaking so violently that they blur. He touches the thick parchment. He pulls the document toward him, his eyes frantically scanning the dense, unforgiving legal jargon. He is looking for a loophole. He is looking for a typographical error, a misfiled date, a saving grace that will allow him to scream at his lawyers and fix this nightmare. He finds nothing. He sees his own signature on the original loan agreements photocopied and bound into the evidence packet. He sees the irrefutable transfer of the deed. He sees the stamp of the federal bankruptcy court validating the acquisition. He sees the name of the entity executing the forfeiture, Apex Equity Partners. He realizes with a crushing, world-ending clarity that the faceless, aggressive corporate entity he had been desperately trying to negotiate with for the past 6 months was actually his own daughter. The daughter he threw away. The daughter he starved of affection, resources, and respect so he could shower everything upon a son who ultimately destroyed him. The realization physically breaks him. The broad, intimidating shoulders that carried the weight of the Williams legacy completely cave in. The arrogant tilt of his chin vanishes. The fire in his eyes is extinguished, replaced by the hollow, vacant stare of a man who has just watched his own execution. He looks like an empty husk, a deflated balloon completely drained of the toxic hot air that sustained him. He sinks down onto the edge of the coffee table, his legs no longer able to support his weight. He looks up at me. The terrifying, booming voice that dictated my childhood, the voice that screamed at me to get out of his house and never return, is completely gone. What replaces it is a fragile, raspy whisper that barely carries over Valerie's muffled sobbing. "You bought the debt." Warren whispers, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring at me as if I am a ghost. "You own the house." This is the moment. This is the exact fraction of a second I have been working toward for 5 agonizing, relentless years. Every skipped meal, every sleepless night studying corporate law, every calculated risk, and every ruthless business acquisition was designed specifically to reach this exact crescendo of justice. I step forward, leaving Elias and the federal agents behind. I cross the Persian rug, invading Warren's personal space, completely reversing the dynamic of power that defined our entire existence. I stand over him, forcing him to crane his neck and look up at me from his broken, stooped position. I do not raise my voice. I do not shout. I speak with the chilling absolute authority of a queen surveying her newly conquered territory. "I don't just own the house, Dad," I say, stepping into his space, forcing him to look up at me. "I own the cars in the driveway. I own the logistics company. I own everything that bears your name." The air between Warren and me is so thick it feels like shattered glass. I am standing mere inches from the man who terrorized my youth, The man who convinced me for 2 decades that I was fundamentally broken and unworthy of respect. He is looking up at me from the edge of his glass coffee table, his chest rising and falling in erratic, shallow jerks. The federal agents stand perfectly still in the background, a silent, imposing guard, framing my absolute victory. Elias remains at my shoulder, an immovable pillar of corporate execution. Warren's eyes dart wildly across my face, searching for a trace of the frightened 20-year-old girl he banished. He finds nothing but cold, refined steel. The realization that I have entirely consumed his empire finally paralyzes his vocal cords. He is a king without a kingdom, a dictator without an army, and I am the architect of his total annihilation. I let him drown in his own panic for a few agonizing seconds before I deliver the final blow. I lean down just a fraction, bringing my face level with his. I want him to see the absolute certainty in my eyes. I want him to understand that this is not a negotiation, and this is not a momentary lapse in his control. This is the end of his world. 15 years ago, you stood in the foyer of this exact house. I say, my voice smooth and dangerously low, echoing clearly through the vaulted living room. It was raining heavily that night. I was standing on your expensive marble floor, holding a black plastic garbage bag filled with the only clothes I could carry. I was begging you for a few $100s to survive the week so I could finish my college exams. Do you remember what you told me, Warren? He flinches. The memory hits him visible in the sudden involuntary twitch of his jaw. He tries to look away, but I refuse to let him break eye contact. I step closer, trapping him against the edge of the table. I remember every single syllable. I continue, letting the immense satisfaction of this moment wash over me. You looked at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. You told me that I was a parasite draining your resources. You told me that my dreams were pathetic and my future was completely worthless. And then you gave me a specific set of instructions before you shoved me out the door and locked it behind me. I take a slow, deliberate breath, squaring my shoulders in my pristine white suit. I promised myself I would return those exact words to you when the time was right. The time is right now. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate my property. The words hit the room with the force of a wrecking ball. Valerie lets out a muffled, strangled gasp from the couch. Malik shrinks further into the cushions, pulling his knees toward his chest. The deed is fully transferred, I state, projecting my voice so every person in the room hears the undeniable legal reality of their situation. The locks will be changed on Wednesday morning. Security teams from Apex Equity Partners will be stationed at the front gates starting tonight. Take only what you brought into this world, because everything else is being seized to cover your catastrophic debts. You do not own the cars in the driveway. You do not own the custom furniture in this room. You do not own the artwork on these walls or the silver in the dining room. It all belongs to my firm. Every single asset you thought protected you is gone. The sheer finality of the eviction notice snaps something deep inside Warren's brain. The terrified, broken father vanishes instantly, replaced by the desperate, calculating businessman. He operates on the only frequency he truly understands, which is leverage and transaction. He believes every interaction has a price, and every crisis has a compromise. He suddenly stands up, pushing himself off the glass table, though his legs are visibly unsteady. He wipes the heavy layer of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, attempting to arrange his disheveled, panicked features into an expression of mutual professional respect. Zora, listen to me, he says, his voice taking on a frantic, pleading edge that makes my skin crawl. We can fix this. You have proven your point. You have clearly demonstrated your exceptional business acumen. You played a brilliant, ruthless hand. I admit it. I completely underestimated you, and you beat me at my own game. He takes a tentative step toward me, holding his hands out with his palms facing upward. He is trying to build a bridge over a gorge he spent a lifetime digging. He is attempting to appeal to the desperate, approval-starved child he assumes still lives somewhere inside me. You do not have to liquidate the company. Warren pleads, his eyes wide and frantic. We can merge our assets. I will give you a seat on the board of directors, a primary voting seat. We can run the logistics empire together. You and me, Zora. I will hold a press conference tomorrow morning and publicly name you as my official successor. I will tell the entire financial world that you are taking over the Williams legacy. That is what you have always wanted, right? To be recognized, to be part of the inner circle. He turns and points a shaking, furious finger toward Malik, who is currently crying silently on the sofa. I will cut him out entirely. I will fire him completely. He is dead to me. You can have his shares. You can have his office. You can have it all, Zora. Just keep the company intact, withdraw the foreclosure, and let us stay in the house. We are partners now. We are equals. The sheer, unadulterated delusion of his offer forces a reaction out of me. A laugh escapes my lips. It is not a warm or joyful sound. It is a cold, sharp, metallic bark of laughter that slices through the heavy, humid silence of the living room like a scalpel. It is the sound of absolute, chilling incredulity. Warren stops talking immediately, his hands freezing in midair. He looks terrified by the sound of my amusement. He realizes his ultimate bargaining chip is completely worthless. I stop laughing and stare at him, my expression hardening into stone, stripping away the very last remaining illusion of his authority. You can't offer me a seat at a table I just bought and chopped into firewood, Warren. The use of his first name strikes him like a physical blow. I see his entire body jerk backward, as the title of Dad is permanently, irrevocably revoked. You do not have a board of directors anymore, I say, my words raining down on him like hammers. You do not have shares to give me. You do not have a legacy to pass down. Apex Equity Partners is already absorbing the logistics network. We are dismantling the physical assets, terminating the executive staff, and selling the client list to your biggest competitor by the end of the fiscal quarter. Your empire is dead. There is no partnership. There is no negotiation. There is no brilliant corporate merger to save your pride. You are a bankrupt civilian, facing federal conspiracy charges, and I am the landlord, formally evicting you from my property. Warren opens his mouth to speak, but the absolute crushing reality of his total destruction finally renders him completely mute. His lungs heave, but no sound emerges. He slowly sinks back down onto the edge of the glass table, burying his face in his trembling hands, entirely defeated. The tyrant who ruled my life has been reduced to a weeping, broken shell of a man. But the tragedy of the Williams family is not quite finished. A sudden frantic rustling of heavy silk fabric draws my attention downward. Valerie, the woman who spent decades flawlessly curating her high society image, the woman who prized her country club status over her own daughter's life, completely shatters. The aristocratic facade melts away, leaving a terrified, desperate woman facing the reality of absolute poverty. She slides off the pristine white sectional sofa and drops heavily to her knees on the Persian rug. She crawls across the floor toward me, her expensive designer dress bunching around her legs, her dignity entirely abandoned. She reaches out with shaking, desperate hands and grabs the hem of my immaculate white coat. She grips the fabric so tightly her knuckles turn a sickly shade of pale yellow. Tears are streaming down her ruined face, dragging thick, dark streaks of expensive mascara down her cheeks. She looks up at me from the floor, playing the ultimate desperate card of a cornered manipulator who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Zora, please, Valerie wails, her voice, a ragged, hideous shriek of pure panic that echoes off the vaulted ceilings. We're your blood. I gave birth to you. You can't leave your own mother on the street. Valerie's fingers are like claws, desperately clutching the hem of my immaculate white coat. I can feel the frantic, trembling energy vibrating through her hands, transferring into the heavy fabric. She is weeping with an ugly, unrestrained desperation that she would have previously found completely repulsive. This is a woman who has spent her entire adult life meticulously crafting an illusion of aristocratic perfection. She hosted charity galas, dictated country club politics, and wore her wealth like an impenetrable suit of armor. Now that armor has been completely stripped away, leaving her exposed, terrified, and begging on her knees. I look down at her. I do not flinch. I do not pull away to protect the fabric of my coat, but I also do not offer a single hand to help her up. I stand there like a monument carved from ice, allowing her to fully experience the crushing gravity of her own irrelevance. For a brief fleeting moment, a ghost of a memory flashes in my mind. I remember standing in the grand foyer of this exact house 15 years ago. I remember the heavy rain beating against the massive front doors. I remember holding a flimsy black plastic garbage bag containing every single possession I owned. I remember looking past Warren's furious screaming face to see Valerie standing on the staircase. She had watched her husband throw her 20-year-old daughter out into a freezing storm simply because I had refused to marry the obnoxious, wealthy business partner Warren had selected for me. She did not raise a hand to stop him. She did not offer me $1. She simply turned around and walked back to her bedroom, choosing her luxurious lifestyle over her own flesh and blood. I pull myself back to the present, focusing my gaze on the ruined woman groveling on the Persian rug. You left me on the street at 20 with a garbage bag of clothes because I wouldn't let him control my life, I state. My voice is quiet, but it possesses an unyielding titanium edge that slices cleanly through her hysterical sobbing. I do not raise my tone. The absolute finality of my words does the heavy lifting. You stood on those stairs and watched me walk out into the rain. You made your calculation that night, Valerie. You decided that your comfort was worth more than my survival. So do not dare invoke the concept of family to me now. Blood makes you related, loyalty makes you family. I slowly shift my gaze away from my mother, dismissing her existence entirely. I turn my attention to the plush white sectional sofa where the true architect of this disaster is currently meeting his fate. The federal investigators have finished observing the family implosion. Their professional patience has expired. The lead agent steps forward, his hand resting firmly on Malik's shoulder, forcing my brother to stand. The sharp, metallic ratcheting sound of heavy steel handcuffs locking into place echoes off the vaulted ceilings. It is a harsh, unforgiving noise that instantly shatters any lingering delusion that this situation can be negotiated or bought away. The agent begins reading Malik his Miranda rights in a flat, monotone voice that contrasts violently with the sheer panic radiating from my brother. I lift my right hand and point directly at the sweating, handcuffed man who was supposed to inherit the world. I make sure Warren, who is still slumped in catatonic shock against the glass coffee table, hears every single syllable. You chose your golden child, I declare, my voice ringing out with undeniable authority. You funded him, you enabled him, and you sacrificed your entire empire to protect his incompetence. Now sleep in the bed he made. The delivery of that sentence acts as a final concussive blast that completely shatters the fragile ecosystem of the Williams family. The room instantly descends into a chaotic, fragmented theater of pure panic. Every single person in the room suddenly realizes that there is no rescue coming. The money is gone. The influence is gone. The protection is entirely evaporated. Brittany, who has spent the last 10 minutes rapidly calculating her own survival, fully abandons the persona of the victimized wife. She scrambles up from the floor, her expensive heels abandoned somewhere near the doorway. She runs to the hallway closet and drags out a massive monogrammed designer travel bag. She drags it back into the living room, completely ignoring her husband in handcuffs. She begins frantically pulling open the drawers of the antique console tables, blindly shoving high-value items into the bag. She throws in silver decorative boxes, a vintage carriage clock, and aggressively rips her own diamond tennis necklace off her throat to toss it inside. She is hyperventilating, gasping for air like a drowning victim. She knows the federal agents heard her admit to signing those joint corporate tax returns. She knows that ignorance is not a valid legal defense for federal tax evasion. She is not just losing her mansion. She is staring down the terrifying reality of a federal indictment. Her frantic packing is the desperate, pathetic flailing of a rat trying to escape a sinking ship. A few feet away, sitting amidst the scattered, highlighted evidence folders on the floor, Jasmine is experiencing a completely different, utterly absurd tragedy. While her brother is literally being processed for federal crimes, and her parents are facing total financial annihilation, Jasmine is entirely consumed by the glowing screen of her smartphone. Her face is twisted into a grotesque mask of sorrow, and she is sobbing with a loud, theatrical intensity. She taps the screen repeatedly, her manicured fingers trembling. The exclusive ultra-premium credit card linked to her account has just been globally declined. The luxury airline tickets she booked for her sponsored Fashion Week trip to Paris have been automatically cancelled. She looks around the room, her tear-filled eyes wide with incomprehension. She is not crying for her family. She is not crying for her father's lost legacy or her brother's impending prison sentence. She is mourning the sudden brutal death of her social media aesthetic. The realization that she will no longer be flying first class, that she will no longer be draped in complimentary couture breaks her shallow heart. She wails loudly, clutching her useless phone to her chest, a perfect tragic portrait of modern narcissism. I stand amidst the wreckage of their lives, watching the chaotic symphony of their destruction play out perfectly. Elias stands quietly at my side, a silent guardian of my corporate victory, casually sliding the forfeiture documents back into his leather briefcase. The execution is complete. The Williams empire has been legally, financially, and emotionally eradicated. The federal agents grip Malik by the arms, turning him roughly toward the grand foyer. His designer suit is wrinkled, his tie is askew, and the heavy metal cuffs dig into his wrists. As they haul him toward the exit, Malik stops. He digs his heels into the Persian rug, resisting the agents for one final, desperate second. He turns his head and looks back at me. His eyes are bloodshot wide and filled with a pure, unadulterated venom. He looks at the sister he tormented, the woman who now holds the deed to his entire existence. His chest heaves as he tries to find the words to express the magnitude of his hatred. "You're a monster!" He spits out the words laced with a toxic, desperate fury. I do not break eye contact. I do not show a single ounce of remorse. I simply fold my hands in front of me, perfectly composed, and I allow a cold, sharp smile to finally touch the corners of my mouth. "No, Malik," I reply, my voice echoing with absolute victorious finality. "I'm just an investor who finally cut her losses." I do not wait for Malik to process my response. I do not stay to listen to Valerie's continued breathless begging from the floor. The grand living room of the Williams estate has transformed into a deafening symphony of their complete destruction, but I have absolutely no interest in lingering for the encore. I have executed the transaction and my business here is concluded. I turn my back on them. I pivot sharply on my heel, the pristine white fabric of my coat swishing around my legs, and I begin walking toward the heavy double doors of the grand foyer. Behind me, the chaotic soundtrack of their ruined crescendos. I hear the harsh, authoritative voices of the federal agents commanding Malik to stand up and walk toward the exit. I hear the frantic, panicked zipping of Brittany's oversized designer travel bag as she desperately tries to salvage a fraction of her stolen wealth before the asset freeze locks her out of her own closets. I hear Jasmine's high-pitched theatrical wailing as she stares at her deactivated credit cards, mourning the sudden death of her luxury influencer lifestyle. And cutting through it all, I hear the pathetic, gasping sobs of my mother, realizing that the golden pedestal she stood on for 40 years has just been smashed into dust. I do not turn around. I keep my eyes focused straight ahead, walking with the measured, unhurried pace of a woman who owns the very floor beneath her feet. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows lining the front of the house, the night is suddenly illuminated by chaotic bursts of color. The red and blue flashing lights of the federal transport vehicles paint the immaculate walls of the foyer in harsh alternating strokes. The lights bounce off the crystal chandeliers and the imported marble, transforming the sanctuary of Warren's elite status into the staging ground for a criminal extraction. It is the visual representation of their total collapse, stark and undeniable. Elias falls into step right beside me. He matches my pace perfectly, his leather briefcase held securely at his side, projecting the impenetrable shield of corporate dominance that defines Apex Equity Partners. Together we push through the heavy mahogany front doors and step out onto the sweeping front portico. The crisp, biting autumn air hits my face immediately. It is a sharp, magnificent contrast to the stifling, suffocating atmosphere inside the house. The air smells like fallen oak leaves, damp earth, and impending frost. It is clean and cold, completely washing away the heavy scent of Valerie's expensive perfume, and the metallic tang of Warren's desperate sweat. I take a deep cleansing breath, filling my lungs with the freezing night air. The scene outside is a masterclass in juxtaposition. 4 federal sport utility vehicles are parked haphazardly across the manicured lawn and the driveway, their light bars spinning relentlessly. Agents are moving with tactical precision, securing the perimeter and preparing to transport my brother to a federal holding facility. Yet parked perfectly in the center of the circular driveway, completely untouched by the surrounding chaos, is my mate black Maybach. It sits idling quietly, an island of supreme, untouchable wealth, waiting patiently for its owner. Elias walks beside me as we descend the wide stone steps. He has already retrieved his encrypted tablet from his coat pocket, his eyes scanning the digital interface with clinical efficiency. The transition protocols have already been initiated, Zora. Elias states, his voice calm and entirely unaffected by the federal agents swarming the property. I have just dispatched the mobilization orders to our secondary legal team. The asset seizure will be fully executed and recorded by 8 o'clock on Monday morning. The corporate accounts for Malik's logistics firm are already frozen by the federal authorities, which perfectly clears the way for our receivership claim. Our private security contractors will arrive at this perimeter at exactly midnight to change the locks, secure the physical valuables, and enforce the 48-hour eviction notice. I nod slowly, listening to the flawless mechanics of our corporate machine shifting into gear. Furthermore, Elias continues swiping across his tablet. I have drafted the internal memorandums for the restructuring of their corporate debt. Once Warren and Valerie vacate the premises, we will immediately put this estate on the private market. Given the prime location and the historical property value, we project a highly profitable turnaround. The liquidation of their assets will more than cover the initial capital we expended to purchase their defaulted loans. Excellent work, Elias, I say, my voice steady and clear. Ensure that the eviction is handled strictly by the book. I want 0 legal liabilities. They are to leave with their personal clothing and absolutely nothing else. If Warren attempts to remove any artwork, vehicles, or financial documents, have the security team detain him and notify the authorities immediately. Understood, Elias replies, tapping his screen to confirm the directive. My driver Marcus stands at attention beside the Maybach. He is a tall, broad-shouldered man with an impeccably pressed suit, and he watches the federal raid with a completely blank professional expression. As Elias and I approach, Marcus steps forward and opens the heavy rear door of the vehicle, stepping back to allow me entry. Before I slide into the plush leather interior, I stop. I place my hand on the edge of the car door and turn around. I look back at the estate one last time. The towering white columns gleam under the flashing police lights. The massive arched windows reflect the chaos unfolding on the lawn. For the first 20 years of my life, this architecture terrified me. This house was a fortress designed to keep me feeling small, unworthy, and perpetually indebted to the people living inside it. It was the physical manifestation of my exclusion. It was the place where I was told I was a failure, where I was starved of affection, and where I was ultimately discarded like an unwanted burden. I stare at the sprawling facade, searching my chest for any lingering trace of that terrified girl. I look for the pain of rejection. I look for the sting of my father's booming insults, or the hollow ache of my mother's cold indifference. I feel absolutely nothing. The emotional gravity of the Williams family has been entirely neutralized. Looking at the imposing structure now, I do not see a childhood home. I do not see a kingdom. I see bricks, mortar, and taxable square footage. I see a highly leverageable asset. The house that was once a symbol of my profound exclusion is now just another line item in the expansive portfolio of Apex Equity Partners. The ghosts that haunted these halls have been formally legally evicted. The power they held over me is dead. I turn away from the house, breaking the visual connection forever. I slide into the back seat of the Maybach, sinking into the luxurious, heated leather. Elias climbs into the passenger side, closing his door with a quiet click. Marcus shuts my door, sealing me inside a vault of absolute silence, completely cutting off the sounds of the sirens and the shouting outside. The cabin is dark, serene, and perfectly climate controlled. I lean my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes for a fraction of a second to savor the absolute purity of the victory. The war is over. Suddenly, a sharp, distinct vibration breaks the silence. My private phone buzzes inside the pocket of my blazer. I open my eyes, reach into my pocket, and retrieve the device. The screen illuminates the darkened cabin, casting a pale glow across my face. It is an urgent email notification flagged with a high priority marker. I tap the screen to open the encrypted message. The sender is the Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Logistics, the largest, most aggressive, and most heavily capitalized rival to my brother's now defunct company. I scan the contents of the email, my eyes darting across the digital text. The CEO of Vanguard has been monitoring the federal raid and the sudden collapse of Malik's infrastructure. He knows the blood is in the water, and he knows exactly who holds the harpoon. The email contains a preliminary, highly lucrative buyout offer. Vanguard wants to purchase the dismantled remnants, the distribution centers, and the exclusive client lists of Malik's seized company directly from Apex Equity Partners. The initial figure attached to the offer is staggering, representing a massive immediate return on my original investment in the Williams family debt. I read the number again, the cold, sharp smile returning to my lips. My family thought this was a petty revenge plot. They thought I destroyed them simply out of spite. They never understood that I do not operate on emotion. I operate on yield. Malik's ruin is not just the end of a family dynasty. It is the highly profitable raw material for my next massive corporate expansion. I lock the screen of my phone and slip it back into my pocket. I look up at the rearview mirror, making direct eye contact with Marcus in the driver's seat. "Take us back to the city, Marcus," I instruct, my voice ringing with a new, dangerous energy. I look out the tinted window as the Maybach glides smoothly forward, leaving the flashing lights and the shattered remnants of my past in the rearview mirror. The game isn't over. It's just scaled up. The weekend passes in a blur of highly coordinated, ruthless corporate efficiency. I do not stay to watch the federal agents load my brother into the back of a transport vehicle. I do not linger to listen to the frantic, panicked negotiations of my father attempting to bargain with men who carry badges and federal warrants. I simply walk away, leaving the shattered remains of the Williams family to suffocate in the toxic environment they spent their entire lives cultivating. By the time my Maybach reaches the city limits on Friday night, my public relations team has already initiated a comprehensive media blackout, ensuring that the impending scandal surrounding Apex Equity Partners' newest acquisitions is framed entirely on my terms. Now it is Monday morning. The air inside my penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Apex Equity building is pristine, cool, and perfectly filtered. There is no shouting here. There are no frantic accusations, no shattered glass, and no desperate pleas for unearned loyalty. There is only the quiet, steady hum of generational wealth being managed, multiplied, and protected. I stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a cup of black coffee in my hand, looking out over the sprawling, jagged skyline of the city. The glass is soundproof. The chaos of the millions of people moving below is entirely muted, reduced to a silent, beautifully orchestrated ant farm. This is the empire I built with my own two hands, forged in the fires of my family's rejection. The heavy mahogany door to my office opens with a soft, barely audible click. I do not need to turn around to know who has entered. The 48 hours have officially expired, Zora. Elias says, his voice carrying the calm, measured cadence of a man delivering a routine weather report. I turn away from the window and walk toward my massive black marble desk. I take my seat, gesturing for Elias to continue. He opens his leather portfolio, extracting a neatly organized stack of legal documents and high-resolution photographs. "The eviction protocol was executed precisely to your specifications." Elias continues, placing the files onto my desk. "Our private security contractors arrived at the estate perimeter at midnight on Sunday. They oversaw the final departure of Warren and Valerie Williams. As instructed, the security team ensured they vacated the premises with nothing more than personal clothing and basic necessities. Warren attempted to load a moving van with several high-value pieces from the primary art collection, arguing that they were personal gifts rather than collateralized assets. And your response? I ask, my tone completely flat. Our team presented him with the itemized forfeiture ledger. Elias replies, a faint razor-sharp smile touching the corners of his mouth. We informed him that removing a single canvas would result in immediate grand larceny charges, adding to his rapidly expanding list of federal liabilities. He abandoned the artwork. They left the property in a standard mid-size rental sedan at approximately 1 in the morning. I look down at the photographs Elias has provided. The images show the grand, imposing iron gates of the estate I grew up in. The gates are shut, secured with heavy industrial chains. New highly visible security cameras are mounted on the stone pillars. The subsequent photos show the interior of the house. It is eerily pristine. The luxury vehicles remain parked in the circular driveway, their keys secured in lockboxes by my asset management team. The custom furniture, the imported rugs, the crystal chandeliers, it all remains exactly where it was frozen in time, waiting to be liquidated. The locks have been changed, Elias confirms, tapping the final photograph showing a newly installed biometric security system on the heavy front doors. The property is entirely secure. The title is fully transferred and recorded with the county clerk. You are the sole undisputed owner of the estate Zora. What are your directives regarding the property? There is a long, heavy silence in the office. A lesser person, a woman still chained to the emotional trauma of her past, might choose to move into that sprawling mansion. A weaker woman might choose to sleep in the master bedroom, to host lavish parties in the grand dining room, to physically occupy the throne that was once denied to her. They would want to rub their victory into the very walls of the house. I am not a weaker woman. I am a billionaire venture capitalist, and I recognize a toxic, depreciating asset when I see one. I have absolutely no sentimental attachment to a structure built on my own suffering. I do not want it. I state, my voice cold and absolute. I do not want to own the oxygen inside those walls. I do not want to pay property taxes on a monument to my father's ego. The house is a liability of memories, Elias, and we do not hold on to liabilities. I reach across my desk and pull a silver fountain pen from its holder. Contact our premium real estate division. I instruct, signing my name across the property transfer authorization forms with quick, aggressive strokes. I want the estate listed on the private ultra-luxury market by the end of business today. Hire a corporate staging company to completely gut the interior. I want every trace of the Williams family aesthetic eradicated. Strip the velvet drapes, remove the heavy antique furniture, and paint every single wall a sterile, blinding white. Turn it into a blank canvas for foreign investors. Price it aggressively to sell within 30 days. The proceeds from the sale will go directly into our primary acquisition fund. Elias nods, taking the signed documents. A highly pragmatic decision. The staging teams will be mobilized within the hour. The Williams legacy will be physically erased from that zip code before the weekend. Now, I say, shifting my focus to the second, significantly thicker folder on my desk. Let us deal with the real prize. Hand me the Vanguard logistics file. Elias slides the heavy folder across the smooth marble surface. This is the culmination of my strategic masterpiece. This is the bleeding, severed head of my brother's highly touted, desperately mismanaged corporate empire. I open the file, my eyes scanning the dense columns of financial data, asset inventories, and the formal buyout offer from Vanguard's chief executive. Over the past 48 hours, while Malik sat in a federal holding cell making panicked phone calls to defense attorneys, he can no longer afford. My team has been conducting a ruthless, microscopic autopsy of his logistics company. The numbers are genuinely pathetic. Malik built his company entirely on the illusion of scale. He leased massive, unnecessary distribution centers to look impressive. He acquired bloated fleets of transport vehicles on terrible credit terms simply to boast about his operational capacity at country club dinners. He hired a massive executive team of incompetent sycophants who spent more time planning corporate retreats than optimizing supply chains. The company was a hollow, rotting shell propped up exclusively by the millions of dollars he embezzled from federal grants and his father's rapidly depleting bank accounts. Vanguard Logistics, our largest and most aggressive competitor in the sector, has presented a massive comprehensive buyout offer. They do not want Malik's brand. They do not want his executive team. They only want the raw physical materials. They want the warehouse leases, the transport vehicles, and the exclusive ironclad client contracts that my firm now legally controls. Vanguard is offering a premium that exceeds our initial projections by 14%. Elias notes, pointing to the final acquisition figure at the bottom of the page. They are highly motivated to absorb the market share before any other competitors realize the Williams infrastructure has collapsed. If you sign this, Zora, the merger is complete. We transfer the assets and Malik's company effectively ceases to exist. I stare at the final page. I think about my brother standing in the living room, his face purple with rage, screaming that I was a bitter, jealous failure. I think about the decades he spent basking in the unearned glory of being the golden child parading his fake success, while I worked 90-hour weeks to build a legitimate empire from the ground up. I do not feel anger. I do not feel spite. I only feel the profound clinical satisfaction of an investor who has correctly identified a market inefficiency and corrected it. I press the tip of my fountain pen to the signature line. I sign my name, sealing the destruction of Malik's entire professional existence. Sell it for parts. I command, my voice devoid of any hesitation. Liquidate the vehicle fleets. Transfer the warehouse leases to Vanguard. And Elias, I want immediate termination notices sent to every single member of Malik's executive board. They enabled his incompetence, and they will not receive a single cent of severance pay. Burn his empire to the ground and salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again. Consider it done, Elias says, gathering the signed contracts. He offers a brief, respectful nod before turning and exiting the office, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. I am completely alone. I lean back in my high-backed leather executive chair, letting the absolute stillness of the room wash over me. I look down at my personal smartphone resting on the corner of the desk. The screen is black. The device is completely blissfully silent. For the entirety of my 20s, that phone was a constant source of severe vibrating anxiety. It was a digital tether to a family that despised me. It was filled with passive-aggressive, guilt-tripping text messages from my mother, demanding I attend holiday dinners just so she could have a target for her condescension. It was filled with pity invites from my siblings, carefully designed to showcase their wealth while highlighting my supposed poverty. It was a relentless, toxic noise that constantly reminded me of my status as the discarded, unwanted outcast. Now that noise has been legally and financially silenced. There are no more group chats. There are no more demands for my attendance at performative family gatherings. There are no more frantic, entitled phone calls demanding that I fix their credit scores or fund their disastrous lifestyles. Warren is ruined. Valerie is destitute. Malik is facing federal prison. Brittany is likely turning state's evidence to save herself, and Jasmine has been permanently cut off from the bankroll that fueled her vanity. They have nothing left to threaten me with, and they have nothing left to offer me. The absolute crushing weight of their financial ruin has built an impenetrable mile-high wall between us. I have successfully amputated the diseased limb of my family tree, and for the first time in my entire life, the silence does not feel like rejection. The silence feels like absolute, unadulterated power. I close my eyes, taking a deep, even breath, savoring the sterile, quiet air of my penthouse. The game has been won. The board has been cleared. I am the sole architect of my reality, unburdened by the parasitic demands of the people who shared my blood. I open my eyes and reach for the next acquisition file on my desk, ready to shift my focus back to the global market. Suddenly, a sharp, discreet chime sounds from the intercom panel on my desk, slicing through the perfect, hard-earned silence of the room. I press the silver button, my eyes still scanning the preliminary data of a tech startup I am considering destroying next. Yes, Sarah. What is it? My executive assistant's voice filters through the speaker, maintaining her usual crisp, professional tone, though there is a slight, almost imperceptible edge of hesitation in her delivery. "Ma'am, I apologize for the interruption," Sarah says, the static of the intercom highlighting the tension in her words. "There is a woman downstairs at the primary security desk in the lobby. She is refusing to leave the premises. Security is prepared to escort her out, but she is becoming highly distressed and is loudly requesting to see you." I pause, my fountain pen hovering a fraction of an inch above the pristine white paper of my next corporate takeover. I do not look up. I keep my hand perfectly steady. "Does this individual have an appointment, Sarah?" I ask, my voice dropping in temperature. "No, ma'am," Sarah replies quickly. She bypassed the standard visitor protocols. "She is currently crying at the reception desk. She says she is your mother." I hold my fountain pen perfectly still in the quiet air of my penthouse office. A single drop of dark ink gathers at the gold nib, trembling slightly, before falling onto the immaculate leather surface of my desk pad. It is the only movement in the room. The silence stretching between Sarah's announcement over the intercom and my impending response is heavy, but it is not laced with hesitation. It is the silence of final calculation. Valerie is downstairs. She has bypassed the marble reception desk, ignored the corporate directories, and thrown herself upon the mercy of a lobby security team that deals exclusively in access codes and threat assessments. I can vividly picture the scene unfolding 42 floors beneath my feet. I know exactly what strategy my mother is employing. It is the last desperate play of a woman whose entire portfolio of manipulation has been liquidated. She has come alone because Warren is thoroughly broken, rendered completely catatonic by his own financial obliteration. She has come because Malik is sitting in a federal holding cell, stripped of his bespoke suits and his unearned authority. She has come because the luxury facade she spent a lifetime building has collapsed, and she is attempting to spend her very last remaining currency, the currency of the maternal bond. She expects an audience. She expects a confrontation. She believes that because she gave birth to me, there is some residual emotional tether she can yank to extract mercy funding, or at the very least, a reaction. She thinks the angry, wounded 20-year-old girl she threw out into the freezing rain is still buried somewhere deep inside my chest waiting for an apology. And she is profoundly mistaken. That girl died a long time ago, starved of affection and frozen by neglect. The woman sitting in this high-backed leather chair is a completely different entity. I do not deal in emotional currency. I deal in hard assets, absolute leverage, and permanent severances. I press my finger down on the silver intercom button. The metal is cool and grounding against my skin. "I don't have a mother," I say, my voice steady, smooth, and utterly devoid of inflection. "Tell security to escort her off the premises. If she resists, they are authorized to contact local law enforcement and have her formally trespassed. Do not interrupt me with this matter again." "Understood, ma'am," Sarah replies instantly. The intercom clicks off. The connection is severed. There is no dramatic swelling of music in my mind. There is no sudden rush of adrenaline or lingering guilt. There is only the crisp, satisfying finality of a closed account. I have officially terminated the deepest, most toxic liability I was ever born into. I picture the security guards, large and unforgiving in their tailored dark suits, gripping Valerie by the elbows and steering her toward the revolving glass doors. I picture her being pushed out onto the bustling, unforgiving pavement of the financial district, completely anonymous, completely powerless, and permanently locked out of my world. I set my fountain pen down onto the marble desk. The metallic clatter is sharp and decisive. I push my chair back and stand up, smoothing the front of my tailored trousers. I walk away from my desk and approach the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that span the entire western wall of my office. The city sprawls out before me, an endless ocean of glass, steel, and concrete bathing in the bright, unfiltered morning sunlight. Down below, millions of people are rushing through the streets, navigating their own tiny, chaotic lives. From this altitude, they look like microscopic data points moving across a massive living spreadsheet. I place my hands behind my back, standing perfectly straight as I absorb the immense scale of the view. This is my domain. This is the reality I forged from absolute zero. I look out at the skyline, tracing the sharp edges of the skyscrapers, and I allow the true magnitude of my victory to finally wash over me. It is a warm, profound sensation that originates in my chest and radiates outward, unburdening my shoulders of a weight I have carried for 15 years. I didn't just survive their abuse, I monetized their arrogance. That is the fundamental difference between survival and absolute triumph. A survivor simply escapes the fire and spends the rest of their life nursing the burns. I did not just escape. I walked back into the inferno, analyzed the fuel source, purchased the land beneath the flames, and sold the ashes for an astronomical profit. I turned my family's greatest flaws into my most lucrative revenue streams. Warren's blind dictatorial ego made him over-leverage his assets. He believed his legacy made him bulletproof completely, ignoring the fundamental rules of corporate debt. I bought that debt for pennies on the dollar, because the market recognized his impending failure long before he did. Malik's unearned arrogance and staggering incompetence made his logistics company a bloated, rotting target. He was so busy playing the role of the visionary CEO that he completely ignored the aggressive expansion of his competitors. I recognized the vulnerability, acquired the leverage, and sold his infrastructure to Vanguard for a premium that shattered my own quarterly projections. Valerie's obsession with high society aesthetics made her completely blind to the financial cancer eating away at her foundation. She was so focused on keeping up appearances that she ignored the structural collapse happening right beneath her designer heels. Every single one of their catastrophic personal failures was a predictable variable in my financial model. They operated exactly as I anticipated. Their cruelty made them predictable. Their entitlement made them weak. I simply weaponized their own hubris against them, transforming decades of emotional torment into a mathematically flawless corporate takeover. The narrative naturally circles back to the beginning. My mind drifts to that fateful evening just weeks ago when this entire operation was set into motion. I think about the heavy embossed invitation card that arrived at my penthouse. I think about the sheer, unadulterated condescension radiating from my mother's voice when she called to ensure I would attend the family dinner. They framed it as an olive branch. They dressed it up as a gracious, magnanimous gesture from a successful family reaching down to acknowledge their estranged, presumably struggling daughter. They thought they were inviting a failure to dinner out of pity. I remember walking into that grand dining room. I remember the smell of the roasted lamb, the clinking of the crystal wine glasses, and the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of their superiority. Warren sat at the head of the table, demanding respect he had not earned. Malik sat beside him wearing a watch that cost more than his company's monthly payroll, grinning with the unearned confidence of a protected prince. Valerie and Brittany whispered conspiratorially, judging my simple attire, completely unaware that the woman sitting across from them possessed the liquid capital to buy their entire bloodline 10 times over. They sat around that mahogany table and actively tried to humiliate me. They paraded their hollow achievements. They mocked my silence. They mistook my calculated observation for intimidation. They wanted me to feel small so they could feel large. They didn't realize they had invited their executioner. They brought the ultimate predator into their own sanctuary and graciously offered her a seat at the table. They handed me the architectural blueprints to their vulnerabilities and smiled while I memorized the load-bearing walls. They were so thoroughly blinded by their own narcissism that they could not see the apex corporate predator analyzing their weaknesses over dessert. They thought they were asserting their dominance, but they were actually signing their own death warrants. The poetic justice of it is almost intoxicating. I did not have to raise my voice. I did not have to throw a single physical punch. I dismantled a 40-year dynasty with the stroke of a pen, the enforcement of a contract, and the brutal, unforgiving application of the law. I stripped them of the only thing they ever truly loved, which was their wealth and their status. I left them with nothing but the reality of their own reflection, and for people like the Williams family, there is no punishment more severe. I step away from the window. The brilliant morning light continues to pour into the office, illuminating the dark polished surfaces and the pristine organized environment I have curated. The air is clean, the silence is perfect. The toxic, suffocating noise of my past has been completely eradicated. I walk back to my marble desk and take my seat in the executive chair. I reach for my coffee cup. The dark roast is still warm. I bring it to my lips and take a slow, deliberate sip. The bitter, complex flavor grounds me, anchoring me entirely in the present moment. There is no lingering anxiety. There are no loose threads to tie up. The eviction is complete. The assets are secured. The liquidation is underway. The Williams family is a closed file permanently archived in the deep storage of my history. I set the coffee cup down. I reach across the desk and pull the thick, freshly printed file toward me. It is the preliminary data for a multi-million-dollar tech acquisition in Silicon Valley. The target is a highly innovative, aggressively expanding software firm with brilliant engineers and terrible executive management. The founder is brilliant but arrogant. The board is fractured. The debt structure is vulnerable. It is a perfect target for an aggressive, hostile takeover. I pick up my silver fountain pen. The cool metal rests perfectly between my fingers. I open the file and begin analyzing the first page of financial disclosures. My eyes scan the numbers, automatically searching for the inefficiencies, the leverage points, and the paths to absolute ownership. My mind shifts gears effortlessly, moving from the conquered territory of my past into the vast, unconquered landscape of my future. The emotional ledger of my childhood has been reconciled. The debts have been collected with extreme prejudice. Every insult, every rejection, every moment of isolation has been paid back with compound interest. Justice wasn't just served, it was executed flawlessly, leaving no loose ends. I am Zora Williams, and my balance sheet is finally clean. True power is never inherited. It is forged in the fires of adversity and sharpened by unwavering independence. Zora's journey teaches us that you cannot heal in the exact environment that broke you. When toxic family members view your existence as a liability, the ultimate victory is not begging for their validation, but quietly building your own unshakable empire. Your worth is not determined by those who deliberately failed to see it. It is measured by the fierce resilience you cultivate when standing completely alone. Have you ever had to cut toxic ties to build success? Subscribe and share now. And